another day at its birth. I got my nose in the breeze, got my toes in the earth, and God whispers in the trees. A mist lays down in the hollow, a delicate dream's daughter. The sun peeks through the willow, the light skips off the water.
One of my most aggravating things in getting old is that I can't remember as many details. I can remember things way back farther easier than I can remember what happened yesterday. What did happen yesterday? I don't know. We're standing in one of the few open areas because when we bought this old farm in 1956, gee, that's a long time ago, there were so few trees on it. Most of the trees, certainly half of the trees that you see in this entire scene, we actually planted little tiny 12, 14-inch seedlings that we got from the state nursery. But the rest of the area, as we look around, trees everywhere. They were not here. If we looked in the direction of the pond down in front, you can see a number of old trees standing over on the other side. They were simply fence row trees. Trees that were there because you could tack the fence to them. And that was the dividing line between our land and the Hope Brothers dairy farm land. I can remember the great herd of old, big, black and white Holsteins over there. When I bought that wonderful little farm, 98 acres, back in 1956, it had been farmed for at least 125 years, and as a result there was one little tiny corner of woods, maybe an acre or two at the most, back in one corner, and then there were a few trees along a cliff. The rest of it had been farmed, and I mean farmed, not just for pasture, but for cornfields and hay fields and oats and wheat, and so it was worn out. I mean, it was typical of all the other land in this whole area. We look out now and we see woods everywhere. But back just 50 years ago, that wasn't true.
Where is there left to go when all the world wants to sleep? The woodpile still has room to grow. A frost will gild the shadows. The geese will sing to me of Mexico, and I will wonder where the time goes.
Any forest, if left alone, follows a definite continuity. It comes on like gangbusters with the early trees like sassafras and dogwood and redbud and sumac. They come on first. And they are about 20 to 40-year-old trees, and then they're gone. By the time they are beginning to die, the early maples and poplars and wild cherry and that sort of tree, walnuts, are coming on, and they reach a climax. And then finally, along come the oaks. So it's a matter of allowing a sequence to develop. Now you can help it during that whole period by deliberately thinning the undesirable trees, giving the biggest trees, the ones that are far enough apart, giving them room to grow, giving them the sky. They've got to have sun and sky. And the more of that they get, the faster they will grow in girth and in width.
Will soar through this wide, white sky to finally find its way to your side.
When I was growing up, we didn't have any woods. We didn't. After all, we'd gone through 100 years of clearing the land for farming, for timber production, and for charcoal manufacturing. Those three things literally denuded this whole section of the country. And yet there was a change of conscience. If it hadn't been a change of conscience, why would President Roosevelt have adopted the idea or accepted the idea from somebody that there ought to be 3 seed programs? And that in itself resulted in 1 million acres being planted to pine trees of all kinds, or evergreen trees of all kinds, in Ohio alone. Then you had somebody come along like Jim Rhodes who recognized that there was an economic opportunity here. I don't know why he recognized it, but he had a political sense that was astounding. Jim became governor, and he was a friend of mine, and that helps. He was an astounding man from the standpoint of establishing state parks and lodges. And that attracted people. And they set examples also for private development. And you begin to see more and more tourist cabins, tourist camps. You begin to see more and more people from the big cities buy small tracts of land and build little summer homes and weekend lodges and cabins. So it all had an effect. Then along came the Metropolitan Park System. Cincinnati has them, Columbus has them, Toledo has them, Cleveland has them, Youngstown. It's just one of all this began to develop as part of an ethic of appreciation of nature and the desire of people to get out of their little home prison and go out and involve themselves. They had created the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves, which were not parklands. They were areas where there were rare and endangered or significant geological or botanical, or even in some instances where certain animals were returning and should be given extra protection. At the same time, the Nature Conservancy chapter in Ohio was formed. We had about, I think, as I remember, 4 staff members. And believe me, they weren't paid very well. But they loved what they were doing. They were young people. There wasn't a great environmentalist movement yet. We had a little over 300 members in the whole state of Ohio paying annual dues of, we'll say, only $10 a year or something like that. And only maybe 25 of those were donating big money or were willing to go and talk foundations and funds into big money to buy land. If we could raise $300,000 in a year, that was big money. But by the same token, land prices were similarly low. And so right off the bat, we began to acquire some very, very fine places. Frequently, as a Nature Conservancy would acquire, through private funds, an area that ought to be preserved forever, then we would turn it over officially and legally to the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves. And Jim and the subsequent governors all approved of that idea, and it still is being done. It's a continuing program. So to that extent, Jim Rhodes was in on the beginning of that kind of a creation. He was very aware of the importance politically, if nothing else, in the preservation of lands and the creation of lodges and the building of lakes and things of that kind. He always was aware of how important that was as a background for politics, a background for getting the broadest possible support he could get in other things that he wanted to do. Amazing politician. I was on the board of the High Forestry Association for a number of years, and that was an important factor because there is a dichotomy there as well as an antipathy at times. Well, the High Forestry Association primarily represents the forest industry, that is the timbering industry, but recognize that there are other facets that will bring support to their efforts. Basically, they want to harvest trees. They represent timber companies. Benton County's got a dozen big companies whose sole purpose in being is to harvest timber for various and sundry reasons. You've got a huge paper company in Chillicothe that buys tons, hundreds, millions of tons of pulpwood a year. You got to have it from somewhere. And so some of it came from state forests. Most of it come from private forests. Landowners who own trees but need money and don't have the ethic of loving what's happening on their land. They don't approach it. But I have no quarrel with that. I just think there is a balance that's necessary, and between people like me who love the forest because of the forest and everything it brings to me in my personal life, and my friends who own forests and expect to harvest so many acres a year, or maybe the whole tract and then replant it. There's a balance. But conservation of natural resources in Ohio is far from complete, far from even being a standard of the population. In other words, For every nut like me who loves the outdoors and wants to preserve it and improve it, there are 50 who couldn't care less. And there are another 2 or 3 that are out to destroy it. So always there has been, and always there will be, a dependence upon a minority, a small minority, for yelling about it, for crying about it, for weeping about it, for pushing about it, to save the remnants out there. When I planted this old barren farm, right after I bought it, it only had about 3 acres of forest out of the 98 acres. But now it is a nature preserve that is absolutely balm to my soul. It really is. So many times when I look down over a valley like this, where this pond is located, where an old creek probably ran 150 years ago, and I see the changes that are taking place, the lushness of the growth now, none of it really cultivated. It's like that clump of cardinal flower there. It's not a rare plant, but it is an uncommon plant. Bringing something like that back to land like this and watching it make its place among the reeds and rushes and grasses and burrs and briars and swamp marshmallow and that sort of thing, it just sort of satisfies my withered old soul. It really does. To think how long it was gone, how long it was absent from this particular area during 100 years of pasturing and farming, and now to see it revert, it does something very, very good for me. I'm sure I'll not be awarded any medals for it, but nevertheless, I'm satisfied with the results.
North wind blows down my collar. The lookout crow shouts a warning. I walk the road out of the holler.